We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into homework. This can be such a challenge for families, especially families with ADHD. So we're going to be talking about why kids with ADHD often struggle with homework and give you specific tools to make it much more manageable.
I love it. So before we jump in, I want you to just imagine with me. So imagine that you go to your office all day, you work on reports, you send a ton of emails, you barely get a break, but you get a lot done. And then at the end of your workday, you're exhausted. All you want to do when you get home is relax. But instead, you walk in the door and unpack your work bag, and your boss immediately texts you with a list of things that you need to do tonight. Because before you can relax, you need to get this all done. It's due when you arrive at the office in the morning. Sounds terrible, right?
Yeah, yes, it sounds absolutely terrible. And our kids work so hard at school all day. And then when they get home, they're often expected to do just a little more work.
Or maybe a lot more work.
Yes. And sometimes that's the tipping point, right? They start negotiating, they start arguing with you. Maybe they're even just full out refusing to do the work. And as parents, we know that you are left feeling like your child is just being defiant.
It's so challenging. And every situation is unique, but there are some common themes as to why homework is so challenging for kids with ADHD. So today we want to break those down a little bit more because as parents, it's so important for us to get curious and understand why our child is struggling with their homework. Because once we know what's going on, that helps us figure out the best way to support them. So let's start with just a couple of the most common reasons why homework can be such a challenge.
Yep. So, one of the first things that I see with families is that kids are really actually struggling with the academic concepts of reading, writing, or math. They might struggle with handwriting. They might struggle with language. And so, when there are actual skill deficits, in those academic areas, you're going to see more avoidance around work. You'll see more refusal. And it's, again, at the core of it. And we're trying to dig deep to kind of look at what is the root of these struggles. The work is maybe too challenging. It's at a frustrational level for kids. Maybe it's even work that they don't understand and they can't do at all, right? So many of our kids with ADHD, we know from the research, 50% of them are going to have learning disorders in reading, writing, or math. And we've talked, again, more about this in our podcast episode 105. Is it just ADHD or is it something else? And we talked about dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, which Katie can never say.
I seriously don't understand. It sounds to me like it should be dyscalculalia because
Yes.
I don't know. I just want to add in extra syllables, but dyscalculia
like
is going to be
echolalia.
Yes.
Because we see so many kids with autism over the years. We think echolalia, so dyscalculalia. I get that.
I know. But what that really means for anyone that's like me and doesn't understand all those technical terms is that these are kids who are really struggling with math, right? It's almost like dyslexia, but for math. There's a clinical term out there that's super hard to say. And once you really understand that that's what's going on, again, that totally changes it from, well, my kid has their head down and they're refusing to do their work. Now I can see, oh, actually, this is really way beyond them and too hard.
Yeah. And I have a daughter who is very compliant and generally very sweet. She has a sassy side to her, but she's generally not like a real behavioral kid. And I remember in kindergarten, I sat down to read with her and we were trying to read books. And I remember her taking the book and chucking it across the room one time and thinking, oh my gosh, like I've never seen these behaviors with her. This is so weird. But it was, again, reading was hard for her at that time. She wasn't able to do it. She was extremely frustrated by it.
Mhm.
So the actual book that I was giving her was too hard. So again, I think as parents, sometimes we don't think about, do our kids have the skills to actually do the work that is in front of them? And we just see so many kids that maybe haven't been identified as having those learning disorders yet, but they're there and they exist. And so when you're asking them to read something, it's actually really hard for them. Writing for kids with ADHD is one of the hardest skills. It requires so many executive functioning skills. And I would say, I always say this, like 99.9% of kids that I see with ADHD have challenges with handwriting.
Mhm.
Being able, having good handwriting requires motor planning. And again, that's a very hard executive functioning skill for kids with ADHD. And so, when handwriting is hard and it's hard to initiate a task, and I'm having to plan and think ahead what I'm going to write and lay things out, again, it makes writing especially difficult, and you might see more avoidance, difficulty getting started around writing tests. So even thinking about, like, how can I accommodate that as a parent? Many of the parents that I work with will handwrite for their kids. So if they have to write a sentence or they have to write a paragraph, their kids will maybe dictate that to them and say it out loud, and the parents write it for them. So those are things that you can do to make it a little bit easier for your child and take a little bit off of them. um, so those are just things to think about. But we definitely see that academic tasks can actually be too difficult, and your child might not have the skills to actually do what they're being asked in their homework. If that's the case, we have a sample letter. We have an online course, Shining at School, all about helping support your child at school. So we walk you through how to write a letter to the school if you think that they have any learning challenges, to get that testing done, so you can really, again, get at the root of why is this so hard for them. So we'll have that in the show notes, a link to our course, just because that is especially helpful in situations like this.
Absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway is that if you suspect that your child is struggling with those academic pieces, you don't need to figure that out. Like you're not able to
Yes.
parse that out. Maybe Lori
No.
can because she can give her own kid a test. But that's most parents cannot do that, and that's okay. So what you're needing to do there is going to the school and sharing your concerns, which we always recommend you do it in writing, and we do walk you through that in Shining at School. But really understanding that that is something that is not your personal thing to figure out. You can
Yep.
ask the school for help, and then they do a whole series of assessments which is going to help figure out, what is their IQ, what are their academic achievements in the different areas, and that really takes a trained psychologist to do that. And that's something that's
Yeah, and
free of cost through the school.
free of cost. And I think the other thing, as a parent, you might be listening and saying, well, we went through that process, and I actually still really feel like there's something else going on. Again, we walk you through in Shining at School. Maybe you did get assessment from the school. Maybe you disagree with those results, and there's
Mhm.
another free way to get a private evaluation paid for. And we walk you through that process if you're feeling like, no, I really think there's more going on, and I really want a licensed psychologist that's trained in this area to take a look at that.
Definitely. That's such a frustration for parents when they're like, "No, I'm
Yes.
waving the flag. I see something going on," and they're not
Yep.
getting that response.
Yep.
So, that's kind of like the first set of issues that can be going on, right? We have some kids that
Yep.
truly are struggling, about 50% of those kids with ADHD, where it is academic and they need specialized support. They need extra help to really bring them up to speed in those areas. Another set of kids with ADHD, and this your child might be both to some extent too, but there's a whole nother set of kids where they might be doing fine in the technical skills of reading, writing, and math, but homework is just a whole host of executive functioning issues for them, and it makes it incredibly difficult for you. And so
Yeah.
our strategies for this type of situation are going to look a little bit different. But let's just back up and say the when it comes to executive functioning, which we know is a primary area of need for kids with ADHD, right? The executive functions are a set of skills and they help us to make a plan, stay on track, complete our goal, right? And kind of reflect on that goal and learn from it. And it's a whole bunch of different skills, but it's you can see how it's a perfect storm for kids with ADHD because one of the executive functions, for example, is getting started. And another one is staying on task when it's boring. And another one is regulating time and knowing how long is this going to take me. I don't know about you, but my kids always tell me, oh my gosh, it's going to take ages. And they really
Yes.
believe that. We have 5 spelling words to write. And I know that my kid can write a spelling word in about 8 seconds. So I'm literally doing the math going, this is less than 1 minute of work. But to my 6-year-old, he really genuinely believes this is his entire night blown out. And
Yeah.
so that's an executive functioning difference. And that's really hard for kids with ADHD. And so we're going to take a little bit of a different approach with those kids. So, a couple things that you can do is you can start by chunking work into smaller pieces. So, maybe your child has to read a poem and write 5 spelling words and do a worksheet of math. If we look at all those things together, that can be really overwhelming. So, breaking it down, which one do you want to do first? Which one do you want to do next?
Yeah.
My personal preference is to start with the easier tasks. I know that's as an adult, I actually do it the opposite. Sometimes I'll do the hardest thing first and get it out of the way. But for our kids, we generally tend towards momentum, right? Like they
Yeah.
need that feeling of a win. So take the
Yes.
easiest task, the smallest little one, even if it's just, Lori always says, writing their name at the top of the paper and
Yep.
and celebrate that. Okay. So what we want to be thinking, how can we break this down into smaller, more manageable tasks? It feels like a mountain.
Yeah, and I even when I'm testing kids, and I'm giving them math problems, for instance, they'll have like 9 math problems on a sheet of paper,
Mm-hmm.
and so many of the kids with ADHD that I'm testing, like they get overwhelmed seeing all of those problems on a page. So I will literally like cover up every other problem
Uh-huh.
and just show them that one problem. We go one by one so that they're not getting overwhelmed or distracted or those types of things.
That's such a great example. And I think there's this sort of movement where parents might be hearing, like, oh, well, you're accommodating them and you shouldn't do that because the world isn't going to accommodate them in that way. And my response to that, because I love that example, is we want to teach our kids to do that for themselves, right?
Yes.
When I get home
Mhm.
from a trip and I look at 3 suitcases, half the laundry's dirty, half the laundry's clean, everything needs to be put away. Nobody knows where a toothbrush was packed, and the dog is hungry, and I forgot to turn on the air conditioning. Like everything is chaos, right? But a skill that I need to have and that I even practice as an adult is to break things down into smaller pieces. I don't need to get every single piece of clothing put away. Right now, I need to pull all the whites out of this suitcase so that I can throw them in the laundry. And when I
Yep.
can break it down and talk myself through it, all of a sudden I'm not so overwhelmed. And that's what we want to teach our
Yeah.
kids is how to break it down and how to do that. You're not necessarily like over helping them or accommodating them in a negative way. You're teaching them a skill, which is to break down that task. And that's so critical and such an important thing in adulthood too.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, again, you might give them that strategy. You might do it for them
Mm-hmm.
and show them how to do that. And then you can talk about, oh, what could we do to make this a little bit easier so that they start to do that more independently. And it takes time to do those things.
Yes, it does. I feel like there's days when I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over and over, but then you have those
Hmm.
breakthroughs where you see them
Yes.
problem solve it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I've invested so much into this moment." And nobody even knows what a celebration it is, but I know because I've
Right.
been modeling this for 2 years and it's
Right.
really beautiful. Another strategy for kids with ADHD is to review their homework before they start and ensure that they understand what to do. And this has so many levels to it. But I know I have one kid who will grab the piece of paper and immediately start filling in the blanks, not taking just the 2 seconds to figure out what are the directions. Because some days it says, break these words up into syllables. Another day it says, alphabetize this list. And just by taking a second to read and understand what you're expected to do, that makes a huge difference. So, depending on
Huge.
your child's level, you might be reading that to them. You might have them read it to you and then explain it. What does it mean? What's that going to look like when we're done? And helping them to process exactly what they're supposed to do. Again, this is a really important skill to have clarity around what is my final result supposed to look like. And that starts with reading those directions. So that's
Yep.
another executive functioning tool that you can use.
Yeah, and those Common Core math questions are
Yes.
so tricky, and I feel like they're like trying to make it super confusing for kids. So
Mhm.
again, even as I feel like I've watched my kids go up in grades to kind of later elementary, and that comprehension piece and reading instructions is so critical in every area of academics.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes back to the conversation about their academic skills, because what happens as you get into the older grades is that you're not
Hmm.
just testing science or math
Yes.
computation skills. You're actually testing your child's ability to read, to synthesize that
Yep.
information, to make inferences. So when there's an underlying learning disability, we're not able to show what we know in things like math, right? Because
Yep.
it's no longer just doing a set of problems. Now you have a word problem and a
Yep.
million baby steps, and it can be
Yep.
really overwhelming. So another idea is to, in this case, when you have these executive function challenges, is to really consider other ways that you can modify the task for your child. And there's so many, we can't list all of them. But for example, if your child can choose whatever book they want, instead of having to read the specific book that you want them to read, or let them dictate to you and you can write down their answers for kids with the handwriting challenges. But if this is something that you're doing constantly and consistently, it's most likely that your child does need accommodations through the school. And so, again, you want to talk to your child's teacher, put your request and your concern into writing to say, this is what homework looks like in our family right now. And this is the challenge, and this is what we're doing to help. And then from there, they can start to make a plan with you and really reducing homework, or maybe your child only does the even problems or something along those lines. There's a lot of options there. So the main takeaway here is just to think outside of the box. What your child comes home with, that stack of homework and all the different pieces for different subjects, that is sort of, I don't know, the movie Clueless. Do you guys remember this when she said,
Uh,
it's just a jumping off point to start negotiations? Think of it in that way. Okay, this is a jumping off point to start negotiations. We
yep.
don't, that is not like an and all be all to say that your child has to do that homework every day. And if it's a daily struggle, definitely talk to the school, because there are options to help
Yep.
reduce or even eliminate homework.
For my kids, the last thing they want to do when they get home from school is homework.
Totally. And the last thing I want to do after a long day of work is deal with the stress of meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking, and cleaning up the kitchen.
Same here. We tried Hungry Root Grocery Service to help us eat balanced meals while saving time and money every week. It's been a game changer for our weekly meals and snacks, and I love that you can customize groceries based on your kids' or your family's dietary restrictions.
Yes, my husband eats gluten free, and I love that I can customize groceries based on our family's needs. And not only can I get complete meals delivered, but I can also order my weekly groceries through them. And I'm always amazed at how my kids will try new things just because they came out of our Hungry Root box.
Yes. It's easy to customize your box each week, and you can skip weeks whenever you want. For a limited time, Hungry Root is offering our listeners 40% off your first box, which is amazing. Just be sure to use the code ChildhoodCollective40 so you can get the discount.
We also have the link and the code in the show notes, so you can try Hungry Root today.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a few other things that you can do, again, at home to make things a little bit smoother and a little bit easier during homework time. So one of the things we always say is make sure their basic physical needs are met before you do something super challenging with them. And what I mean is, are they thirsty? Are they hungry? Did they get a snack after school? Did they not eat lunch? And their medications, was kicking in, and all of a sudden it's wearing off, and I'm like super hangry, and they need more, maybe more food when they get home from school if they're not eating enough during the day. Do they need to change their clothes to feel more comfortable? Do they need to use the restroom? Do they need to move their body because they've been sitting all day at school before you jump into homework? So again, really thinking about that, because our kids are not good about communicating. Like, I have one kiddo that she like doesn't tell me she needs to use the restroom until she's like about to like go to the restroom. Like, it
Yes.
is, I'm
It's a dangerous
screaming. It's a
situation. Yeah.
dangerous situation. And like, clearly there was something leading up to that.
Mhm.
But they aren't really good about communicating that they're hungry. Sometimes they communicate through their behavior. And then we have to kind of problem solve, like, have they eaten
Uh-huh.
in the last few hours? Like, are they thirsty? So just making sure you're looking at things like that.
With my kids,
Um,
I think it's not that they're not good communicators. I really think they do not notice until it's like an emergency situation.
yes.
And same with the bathroom, but also, like you said, even
Yep.
being thirsty. There's so many times I pick my
Yes.
kids up from school and I just pass them a water bottle and they'll sit there and chug water. But if I
Yes.
said to them, "Do you want water?" they would say, "No, I'm good." So
Exactly.
it
Yep.
really, and we're in Arizona, it's still hot here. It's always hot here, but it's really important to notice and to help our kids really read those cues, because part of the ADHD experience for a lot of people is lack of awareness of those things until it is an emergency. And so,
Yeah.
again, keeping that in mind, like if your child says, "I'm not hungry," but they're really acting off, there's a very
Yeah.
good chance that they don't know. And so
Right.
you can help them figure that out.
And that's why we always encourage routines, like at various times of the day, whether it's bedtime, morning time, after school routines, because
Mhm.
I, as a parent, like don't remember those things either. But if I have a routine that is like every time we get home from school, we do snack and water, or for me, we're always like going off to like a sports activity or doing something.
Yes.
So I'm making sure I bring those snacks in the car, and I make sure the kids eat a snack and drink some water before we get wherever we're going, because they're always hungry.
Same. My kids
Yeah.
are starving when I pick them
Yes,
up. Yep.
totally. Um, so again, like those things are really important and often overlooked, I think. Limiting distractions. This is a huge area that I talk with parents about all the time, because many of you, we know, have multiple children, lots of young children and older children. And so sometimes you have the younger kids watching TV in another room while you're trying to do homework with the kids, but they're distracted because they're hearing the TV or they're wanting to get up and see what's going on. So again, trying to think about, could we use iPads with headphones so they're not hearing that? Or does our kid who's doing homework need to have headphones on? Do they need to be in a different area that they're not tempted to kind of get up and see what's going on? Remember, distractions are just very hard for kids with ADHD. So how do we set up an environment that is conducive to them focusing is really important. Again, we know when you have multiple kids, it is challenging, but just something to think about and play with.
Mhm.
Um, Setting up a consistent space and routine. I'm not going to go into that because we have a whole episode 124, that you can check out. We'll put that in the show notes on how to set up a homework space. So yeah, those are just kind of a few things that you can think about.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for parents to really play detective. And I just said, get curious. Everything can be an
Mhm.
experiment. So, what I mean by that is, does your child do best when you give them 30 minutes after school to decompress? And that might be the case for a lot of kids. They might need, like Lori said, to get their wiggles out and run around and, get some deep pressure from jumping on the couch or something. But there's other kids who, whenever we share a tip like this, parents will say, "Well, my child actually does better when they come home and go straight into homework." And I believe them. Absolutely.
Yes.
There are kids
Mhm.
where that's going to work better. Another one that a lot of people talk about is breaking work down into 10-minute intervals and giving your child breaks every 10 minutes. And that might be perfect for certain kids. For my kids, that is a nightmare to give them a 10-minute break and or work for 10 minutes, take a break for 10 minutes, and then somehow get everyone back to the table to work for 10 more minutes. No, thank you. I will not be doing that in my home. And because we've tried it and it doesn't work, but that's okay. That's not a failure. That's me getting curious, playing detective, and figuring out what works best for my kids. And we encourage you to do the same because every child is unique, but you can start to find some systems and some certain strategies that do tend to work for your kids. And even saying that, I know there's going to be days when that system doesn't work perfectly, and that's okay too. This is something that we can expect is normal variation. All of our kids do that. All of us as adults do that too. And then, of
Yes.
course, our favorite soapbox, do not overhelp your child with homework. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when we do testing, we see families coming in and saying, oh my gosh, homework is such a struggle. My child is really, really having difficulty, but their grades look awesome. And the reason is because the parents are working all night long on homework. And the problem with that is that the school isn't getting an accurate picture of what your child can do. So they're seeing this completed, beautiful work and thinking, okay, this is fine. Things are
Yeah.
going well. But homework is actually a litmus test for teachers to understanding what can your child do at home with some level of independence, right? So some help is okay. But if you are spending hours and you're pleading with your child and begging them and there's tears and all these things, realizing it's okay to reach out for help because at that point, the homework is not an accurate picture of what your child can actually do.
Yeah, and speaking along those lines, of a few, last things to keep in mind is your relationship with your child is so much more important than homework.
Yes.
So I just, again, almost every ADHD parent that comes in and I'm meeting with them, they're talking about we have 20, 30 minutes of homework and it's taking us hours every night at the expense of our relationship. We're fighting, we're negotiating. After school is chaos. We dread it. I mean, I hear that all the time. I dread after school because of homework. Sometimes it's get interfering in your child's ability to like do the fun things that they enjoy, like doing sports or after school activities, because parents are saying we don't have time to do those things because they're spending so much time on homework. It is not worth it. Again, there's not even great research to show that homework is effective for kids, especially in elementary school.
So
So I
true.
know so many parents are saying, um, again, like, I don't want them to like not be prepared for college. I want to say, I hated homework as a child. I never did my homework. I refused to do my homework. I was that kid. And I'm a doctor now. Like, I turned out okay. And I can tell you numerous stories of other people who didn't do their homework and they turned out okay. Like, you can go to the school. And again, like we said, put your concerns in writing. We walk you through how to do that in our online course, Shining School. Put your concerns in writing, have a meeting, get it into a formal plan, and get rid of homework altogether. Or minimize the homework so that they're only getting half the amount. Or find out if there's struggles in a certain area so that they're getting homework that is at their actual academic level, so that you're not pulling your hair out every night. But if you need to get rid of it, it's okay. The other thing I hear from families who do have a child with dyslexia or a learning disorder is that we really need to get that intervention. They're not getting it at school, so they're going to see a specialized tutor. That's also a really important time to be working with the school to eliminate homework for that period. Your child can't be doing homework and can't be doing Orton Gillingham dyslexia tutoring after school. It's just not possible. So you need to have those accommodations to get rid of homework, even if it's for a period of time, so they get that intervention for their academics that they really need.
Absolutely. I think so many parents just don't realize it's like the homework comes home and that's what I have to do, whatever it takes. And we're here to tell you that
Yes.
that's really not the case. And we do
Yes.
understand firsthand as parents just how stressful homework can be. And we just want you to know that with the right supports and a really solid plan in place, it can get easier for everyone in your family.
Yes.
And as always, keep in mind that we are here to support you. Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.